Excellent. So welcome everyone. My name is Anthony Taylor, Managing Partner at SME Strategy, and I'm really excited to share with you in today's webinar how to get your team aligned with your strategic plan. So everything we do at SME Strategy is all about alignment. We facilitate strategic planning sessions, and today I want to share with you our best practices for getting alignment with your team, how to use that as a driver of your strategy, driver of your performance, and how to accomplish your strategic plan successfully. So our agenda today, we're going to do about a 45-minute presentation on how to create your strategic plan. What do you need to know? We'll talk about some case studies, what to do next, and then next steps for you. We're going to be available after the webinar to answer questions, do some Q&A, and what have you. So a little bit about me. I'm the managing partner and lead facilitator at SME Strategy. At SME Strategy, our clients are SME, small to medium enterprises. We also have government and schools and nonprofits. And I'm just going to make sure, I just want to make sure everybody's got their audio on. By the way, can everybody hear me before I jump right into it? Can you guys hear me and see me okay? There's a chat on here. Just make sure that you guys can hear me. And I just want to make sure that everybody is good on the audio before I jump right into it. And to be honest, I really get excited about getting to share with you guys. So I just want to get into it, but really making sure that everybody's with me as we go forward. So fantastic. Thank you all. So we work with organizations all across Canada, the US, and around the world. Last year, I did over 75 strategic planning sessions with organizations. And so I'm also an author of 2 books, one book on strategy and one on entrepreneurship. So before we get any further, I want to share with you my why. Like the reason why I do strategic planning is because strategic planning is my way to change the world. Like I get to share with you all. I love getting to share, but it's really because I get to change the world. So it's selfish because I get something out of it. Now, why I get what I get out of it? I do it because I want you to love your job. And if you love your job, it's going to positively impact your people. So the people that you lead, the people that you work with, which is going to positively impact their families, which is going to positively impact the communities that we live in. And so that's really, my ability to create strategic plans, get people on the same page, helps me change the world. And that's why I love getting to do it. So are you in the right place? I know we've got a bunch of people from all over the world today. Are you in a senior leadership team? Are you leading a team or part of a team? Or are you running a business or organization? And if yes, if you answered yes to any of those, you're in the right place. I really want to make sure that this training today is for you. Obviously, if you're a consultant, there's a lot of benefits you can get to here, but really it's aimed at leadership teams and people who are leading teams. So I know on a lot of webinars, people are like, well, let's just wait to the end of the webinar. He's going to sell me something. I'm going to let you know that we are a business. We do have things to offer. So after the webinar, you will be able to enroll in our course on how to create a strategic plan, and you will be able to learn more about our consulting services. So we are, just to let you know, so you don't have to wait for what's coming around the corner, that's what we're going to give you the opportunity to participate in. So there's nothing else, and you guys can listen fully knowing that that's what we're going to do. So I want to talk about getting alignment with your team. That's really what today's webinar is about, getting alignment. Why alignment? Why is alignment important? And this is my favorite analogies for alignment. If you know me a little bit, I have analogies for everything within strategic planning, but you could say the difference between a shotgun or a laser, or making sure that everybody is moving to the same direction. Like what is X? X marks the spot. Try to pick a restaurant for 10 different people. But, one of the things that really gets me when I work with leadership teams is everybody has a different version of the future. And what the analogy we says is, when you build a puzzle, what are the steps that you go through? You take the puzzle, you dump out the pieces on the floor, on the table, and you have all of these little fractional pieces, which is fundamentally how most organizations create strategic plans. They have their operations, they have their people, they have their systems, and you're trying to put everything together towards a clear vision of the future. Well, how do you know what that clear vision of the future is? In the case of a puzzle, you look at the picture on the front of the box. And so often, organizations don't go through the process of creating that clear picture of what success looks like. And when you have that clear picture, you know that everybody is moving towards the same place. There's no frustrations or anxiety about what is coming up next, because everybody knows where you're going and what success looks like. And it's going to create a lasting difference for everybody in your organization. And ultimately, it's going to help you be more successful. So that's really what I want to create out of today's webinar and what you can get out of strategic planning. So how do you get alignment? We talked about alignment in the context of strategic planning. So I'm going to share the strategic planning process. We've looked at strategy development in a couple phases. So there's the preparation phase, there's the plan when you're actually like doing your strategy session, there's finalizing the plan. Once you have the documents, putting everything on paper, making graphics, doing whatever you need to do to tighten it up. There's the sharing phase, which is telling everybody about your organization. And there's the execute phase, which is, executing on the individual components of the plan. All of these areas have components of alignment to it. But for today's training, I'm going to focus just on the preparation phase, because that's where most people come to us. They've downloaded one of our tools and they say, I'm getting ready to do a strategy session, or, our team is wanting to get together and I want to do strategy, but I don't know how. So I wanted to set you up with ingredients for success to lead you from the preparation phase to the planning phase as it relates to strategy and alignment. So we talked about how to set up your plan for success, the where, the when, the how. So when we look at doing strategy meetings, people ask us questions like, oh, should we do this on-site or off-site? Can we get it done in a half day, or can we get it done in one day? And some organizations say, okay, we need 2 or 3 days. And I know some companies that do their strategy retreats over several weeks, okay? How often should you do strategy development to get alignment? Should you do it every month, every quarter, or every year? Who's going to be responsible for making the agenda? What are you trying to accomplish? And are there team building activities? So those are some of the biggest questions that people come to us when they say, I want to get alignment with my team and I want to get a strategy session on the books. Now, before I get into the how of it, I want you to think that when you're getting alignment with your team, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and you can get alignment at a lot of different levels of the organization. We have alignment at the board level, which is typically the highest level of the organization. We have alignment with the senior leadership team. So many of you, as your CEOs, executive directors, or VPs, that's the level that you're operating at. You have team leads, so who is your second, like your middle management, what have you, and then teams and departments. And those are the individual people all the way to the frontline staff that are executing the plan. But you want to consider that meeting with these people will all generate different levels of alignment. And you want alignment at the leadership team level all the way to the ground and then back up. So the question for yourself is, as you go through this strategic planning process and as you go through this alignment process, have you taken into consideration all of the different groups that exist in your organization that you need to get aligned from? Because just like your hand looks aligned, if you drew a line from your fingers over time, it would get further and further apart. And that's often what we see, is that while the board or the senior leadership might be clear on what success looks like, they might have that picture of the future, often the team leads and departments aren't aligned on what they need to do to move that forward. So if you are considering putting all of those people in a session, who is going to be in the meeting? Are you going to have stakeholders as part of it, so external or internal stakeholders? Are you going to have the senior leadership? Are you going to have frontline employees? Or are you going to have middle management? So what we've found is, as you add people to the process and to strategy meetings, the conversations become richer, but the process becomes more complex. You can imagine that if you're trying to get agreement and alignment by 30 people, it's going to be a lot more complex than if you're trying to get alignment between 2 or 3. So you want to build that in. And I typically focus on senior leadership first and then cascade it down. It's important to get these people's feedback, the frontline management, the middle management, but you want to make sure that the level of decision-making is aligned as well. So you don't want frontline employees necessarily making decisions that senior levels leaders are going to be making. So the question I asked earlier was, how long should our strategy session be? Most of the clients that we work with, and typically work with organizations from 10 to 100 million in top line revenue, need at least 2 days for strategic planning and an additional half day for action planning. That's to unpack the plan and to move that forward. We found that if you want to do like one day, which most people say, you know, I only have one day, what can I do in one day? You can get a high level of alignment, but ultimately it's going to take you way more time and energy to unpack the plan in the future. So I recommend the investment for yourself is focus on 2 days at least so that you can get the alignment, unless you have a very small team of, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 people, in which case you can move through the spaces faster. So in our experience, a one-day session gives you 5 good conversations, so good chunky conversations, and you get high level of alignment because you've only been sort of focused on it for that one day. In a 2-day session, you get 8 to 10 conversations. I think that's ideal for most organizations, and you may need more time for action planning. Again, unpacking all of those strategic priorities, really making sure that you have robust data and you have all of that organized. Or 3 days, a complex organization, if you have to make a specific decision about a thing, whether that's a funding structure, whether that's competition, new product line, marketing plan, you have something really specific that you want to talk about. Deeper action planning, if you want to get into 3, 6, 12-month action plans and details and KPIs, measures, all of that. And then aligning multiple groups. That's when, if we start aligning the different groups and cascading the plan down, that's when 3 days can be really useful. Why I like them when they're condensed is that there's less of an ebb and flow. You're really in the rhythm, and then everything that you've worked on is on the top of people's minds. By the way, I'll just let you know, if you have any questions, there is a chat box. You can shoot them in. We'll be asking or answering questions after, but if there's something that you want asked right away, be sure to just put them in the chat box as they come up. Okay, so another thing that we see when teams are looking for alignment is that they really want to focus on, you know, the outcomes. What are we going to get on it? And so I think it's really important, whether you do the 1, 2, or 3 day session, that you're clear on the goals and objectives of the meeting. So 1, what are you hoping to get out of the meeting? And then keep that on the forefront, because if you've ever heard the expression like herding cats, is that often you can get drilled down into a conversation when you get into the specifics. So I recommend that you set the objectives early and you stay focused on the written agenda so that the context of the day drives you forward. If you don't have one already, on our website, we have a 1 and 2 day sample strategic planning agenda that you can use to like guide the frameworks of your call, of your meeting rather. So one of the main objectives we see obviously in strategic planning is to talk about strategic work. So I wanted to take a couple moments here to distinguish operational and strategic work. So operational is typically making yes, no decisions independently and making a work plan. Are we going to do this? Are we going to not do that? You know, what are we doing in our day-to-day, the 80% of our time? Strategic work looks long-term and looks both inside and outside of the organization, because you don't exist in a silo. So the strategic work should align the team and ultimately guide the operational work. You know, if all you're doing is doing, then you're not clear on why you're doing it and where you want to go. You know, one of my favorite stories is in Alice in Wonderland. I've said this, you know, ad nauseum, but there's a point in Alice in Wonderland where the Cheshire Cat pops up because Alice gets to a fork in the road. And at the fork in the road, Alice says, you know, which road should I take? And the Cheshire Cat says, well, where are you trying to get to? And she says, well, I don't know. To which he replies, well, then any road will get you there. And so strategically, if all you're focused on is the doing, then whatever road is going to get you there. But if you have a clear vision of the future and clear alignment as a team as to why you're going then it'll guide the operational work that you do on a day-to-day basis. So how do you get alignment? How do you set up your strategic planning meeting for success? So number 1, as I mentioned, create a structured and purposeful agenda. Here's the things we want to accomplish, especially if you have limited time. You really want to make sure you're focused. 2, survey leadership and staff as to see how they feel about the current culture, strategy, and alignment. When we look at goal setting, you want to go from your current state to your future state. So it's an opportunity to really sort of test the waters as to see where people are at and what's important to them, how they're feeling, so that when you get into the meeting, you really get a sense of if people are aligned, if there's any communication problems, what opportunities are there. We find it cuts down on the meeting time and really helps people feel heard. The other thing is that some people like time to process information. As you might have guessed, I'm a sort of outgoing, fast-talking guy, but some people really like the time to process and assess things. So when you do the survey, it allows you to get those people bought into the plan, get their alignment, even if they're not going to speak out all the time in a session. The other thing that you want to do to make sure that everybody is aligned and has the same sort of foundation in terms of how to move forward is providing market and financial data required for decision making. Obviously, there's infinite amounts of information, but before the meeting, make sure you provide any information you might need to be able to make decisions if the purpose of your meeting is to make decisions. So how can you solicit this feedback as an organization? Again, everything we're talking about is alignment. So you can do surveys. You can have meetings ahead of time that inform the strategic plan. You can do other offsites like team building sessions or anything that you've done in the weeks and months prior to sort of inform or get where people are at, including focus groups. You can use HR software. Some people, have a monthly or daily check-in on the software so you can see where people are at. And then another way is any other software to get data, whether that's, your financial information, whether that's market trends, whether that's, what's happening in any other industry. Any feedback, any information is going to provide a greater clarity and a greater perspective so that everybody can be moving along towards the best decision possible. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about stakeholder analysis, because often senior leaders get so wrapped up in moving forward the process, they don't think about their stakeholders, whether that's internal or external stakeholders. And if you don't have their buy-in, if you aren't aligned with them, then they can be a real thorn in your side. And I'm not going to use a more ruder word, but it's important to recognize who your stakeholders are and how they can impact your decision. I have a friend who was leading a strategy session, and they went through the process once, went through the process another time, and they kept getting blocked in the implementation phase. And it turns out that one of the key stakeholders who had a lot of influence was never consulted on the process. And so if you don't do that, they're going to hold it up. And the worst part is you might not even know why. Okay, so this is one of those hidden roadblocks that if you don't think about ahead of time, it can be a real pain in your side. So how do you figure out who your stakeholders are? So one is anybody that holds a stake or an interest in what you're doing. So in your plan, it's anybody who basically stands to get affected by it. Why are they interested in what you're doing is important to think about. What is important to them? What do they care about? And what actions can and will you take to support them or guide them? So I'm going to show you in a graphic here. Now you can imagine this on a 4x4 grid. If they have high influence and high interest, which means they have a lot of power and interest, you want to monitor closely. You want to keep them engaged. You want to share a lot of information because you really need those people on your side. If they have high influence and low interest, you want to keep them satisfied. Just make sure they're happy, because if they're not happy with you, they're going to, be a big pain in your butt. Stakeholders also include your board of directors or any other funders. Okay, if you're in the nonprofit world, understanding funders is really key. If they have low influence but a lot of interest, for those of you that work in government, the public is a high interest, low influence group often. Then you want to keep them informed. You want to make sure that they're aligned with what you're up to, which means making sure that you communicate regularly and often. And finally, if they have low influence and low interest, you just want to keep an eye on them. Okay, anybody can move up or down these quadrants, but it's a really useful tool to survey the environment around you before you move forward on your plan. Okay, so I want to share a couple case studies in terms of how we have gotten alignment, what we've done to engage stakeholders, and what we've found work from our clients, and the different ways that our clients have actually done stakeholder engagement and gotten alignment with their team. So It's a great healthcare organization in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was the senior leadership retreat that we did over 3 days. And what was really cool about this is that for the first day and a half, we worked with the board of directors to clarify the vision, mission, and strategic priorities. For the next day and a half, for the first half day, we had the directors and the senior leaders. And then the third day, we had just the senior leaders. So what we did over those 3 days was cascaded the strategic plan right there, going from the highest level, board of directors, to senior leadership and middle level staff. And that way, everybody was bought into the process. It was super engaging, and there was no gaps in information in terms of how the decision came to be. Because the board, while they created the vision and the direction, communicated that right away, and then we were able to bridge the gap between the communication right there. So it wasn't just like, oh, these guys came up with this plan for us. It's we were actually part of the plan. And the other part that was really neat about this is that the senior leadership team was able to create the roadmap, the doing part, while the board stepped out when it came out to the like what is going to be done day to day, because it had nothing to do with them and they didn't need to be there. Another really cool example, last year we worked with the Reserve Bank of Fiji to do their strategic planning session. And this session was 45 people across the island. And we only had a day and a half to do their strategic planning session. And they had the governor, they had like local government, and what they had done on the back end was they did all the foundation work in terms of the current state, the trends, the vision. They fundamentally did all the back office stuff with their, we call them the secretariat team, the team that was basically the strategic planning committee that was driving it forward. But if they had just created that plan in isolation, it wouldn't have moved forward. So what was really key was having this meeting, and over a day and a half, we were able to get 45 people to align on a common direction so that everybody felt confident moving forward. And one of the things that they said to us, he says, in the history of working with the bank, we have never agreed until today. And that was just so interesting, because we did this session and we got to the end of the first day around the wording, not necessarily around the vision. It was just around the words. Like, what was one minuscule word? And I can't see your faces right now, but I'm sure you've had people that have gotten hung up on semantics, that like you're trying to move something forward and they're like, actually, you know what? I don't agree with that word. So this is one of those situations where we have that. And in the session, I said, okay, outside of the word, and outside it's paraphrased, are you all in agreement that you want to accomplish like this future, this vision? And unanimously, yes. And when we were actually able to get aligned on what the true outcome was, on that true picture of the future, that's when everybody really bought in and was clear on not just the what or the how, but the why. And so when we look at alignment, it's really important that if anything you take away is that to share that future, that vision, and that's the thing you want to get aligned on. Everything else will figure itself out. Everything else will fall out from there. The last really cool case study we did with the Faculty of Applied Science at the University of British Columbia, they were creating their strategic plan for the next 5 years of their faculty. And it was 5 different disciplines within this faculty. And the new dean had come in. He said, I don't want to just create a plan in my office and then push it on people. I really want them to be part of the process. I want them to see that they were heard. I wanted to see that they contributed, and I wanted them to feel heard. And I was like, that's awesome. Let's do that. And so what we did 20-something stakeholder engagement sessions where we did scenario planning with staff, students, and faculty for them to share, where do they see the world going? What are some potential realities that might happen in the future that might affect their education or anything else? And then what are the things that we needed to do to be successful in those worlds? So if you know strategic planning and if you know scenario planning, we took 2 different trends, created 4 different potential universes, and then we mapped out a strategic plan for each of those. So we fundamentally created 80 different worlds that were possible, but out of staff, student, faculty, different interests, different passions, and different levels of life. We were fundamentally able to pull out what that clear vision of success looked like, what was important to all of them, and then to communicate that in a strategic plan that represented not only the needs of the university and the faculty now, but what it will be for the next 5 and 10 years to come. And everybody said at the end of the process, they said, you know, we are satisfied with the level of engagement. You might have like even over-engaged, but we're bought in. And you can imagine, you know, thousands of people needed to be brought into this process. But if they hadn't done that, then it would have been just another strategic plan. It would have been a plan on a shelf that never got executed. And instead, everybody can see their future within that plan and they want to be part of it. So how do you get alignment? When we look at alignment, when we look at strategic planning sessions, fundamentally everybody's like, well, I want to have a strategy session so I can create my vision, create my mission, create my values, create my strategic priorities and action items. Like that's what you can get out of it. That will be the outcome. But that's like the feature, okay? The benefit, what you really want is the alignment, the buy-in, the direction, the certainty, and the support. You know, we've seen clients after creating their strategic plans, they said, I just feel so settled. I know where my team is going. My team knows where they're going. We're communicating. We're all on the same page, you know, and everybody's working towards a common goal. So like, while you might want vision, mission, values, strategic priorities, and action items, which is like the standard strategic planning stuff, you know, what you're really going to get is that alignment, the buy-in, the direction, the certainty, and the support, so that you as a team are actually moving forward towards your common outcomes. When you know what your successful future is, when you're aligned on that clear vision of the future, you're only doing one of two things. You're either moving closer or further away. And it really informs your decision-making on a day-to-day process. You're either doing it or you're not. But without alignment, you have no idea if you're doing the right things. So clear vision of the future is paramount to being successful in your strategic plan. Okay, so how do you get alignment with your team? First of all, get buy-in. Bring people into the process. You need to pull them into the planning process instead of pushing the plan on them. You want to match goals and motivation. You know, while your organization might have a vision for the future, how does that impact the departments? How does that impact teams? And how does that impact individuals? And you want to do is match the alignment, get their alignment aligned with you. So fundamentally, everybody is going towards the same place. And if they're not going to the same place, that's okay. All it means is they're not going to the same place. So you just say, okay, well, you might not be going on this trip with us, and that's fine. Because if somebody doesn't want to go where you're going, do you really want them going there with you? I know I've gone on hikes before with my family and family-in-law. I'm dragging my feet because I don't want to go. I'm sure you have people in your organizations that don't want to go. And that's their experience every day at work. And then they like poison the rest of the group because then it's like, this is the worst. Why are we doing this? This feels like more work. You know, getting buy-in from your team really means that you pull them into the process so they see an opportunity in it for themselves. Next, communicate clearly and simply. You got to bridge the gap between the expectations and what is actually so, or bridging the gap between where we are now and where we want to go. Let people know what that future is and why we're going there in the first place. And the last piece to getting alignment is, are people given the tools they need to be successful in this plan? Because if we're expecting you to drive 100 miles or 100 kilometers, depending on where you are, but I only give you 80 miles or 80 kilometers worth of gas, you already know the plan is destined to fail. And you're not going to get alignment. You say there's no chance in heck that this is going to happen. So really need to be aware of, are your people given the tools they need to succeed? Which in this case could include a common framework, a common language, training, support, accountability, and obviously resources. Strategy is about choices. You know, you have so much going on your plate on a day-to-day basis. I assume you have no free time. So strategy in itself is about choosing what to do and what not to do. And if you want to be successful in this strategic planning process and in getting alignment, you need to choose getting alignment. You need to choose bringing people into the process. You need to choose providing them the tools they need to be successful. Otherwise, you're just talking smack. You're talking the talk, not walking the walk. So I invite you is to make the choice today to align your team, get them bought into the process, and get them engaged into what you're wanting to accomplish as a team. So I'll talk to you a little bit about our process, how we lead strategic planning and what we do, and that you can borrow, steal, whatever you want to move this with your team. And all of our resources are available online because, it's just, that's what we want to do. That's how we're going to make an impact for people. So how we prepare for strategic planning meetings for our clients. We survey meeting participants. So again, we talked about being able to cut down on meeting time because people have seen the questions before. They've had a chance to see the answers of their peers and process everything, which means it cuts down on the time actually in the session. We interview senior leadership so that we can ask probing questions. We can hear the things that aren't being said. And we really get an idea of the business or the organization's pieces that are sort of below the surface. Because if you don't address the stuff that's below the surface, you're going to build a plan on top of a rocky foundation, and then your plan is going to fail. Not necessarily because the plan was bad, but because you didn't have the organizational health, you didn't have the structure to make it successful. We read past strategic plans and other documentation just so we can get a sense of where you're at, how you got to where you are, and then our own industry research. Again, you can imagine doing 75 different strategic planning sessions and reviewing other people's plans. We see a lot, and which is great about being industry agnostic, is you get to see a lot of different things. And then this is, if you have your pen and paper and you haven't taken notes yet, this is the juice right here, is what we go through to lead our teams through getting strategic alignment. So our process is called aligned strategy development. Okay, so we develop a strategy for alignment exclusively. And we go in 5 phases. Where are we now? That's our current state, our SWOT, our PESTLE analysis, all of that industry research. Where are we going? What does success look like in terms of vision, mission, values, or anything else, that clear picture of the future? What is going to get in our way? Identifying risks and roadblocks so we can be proactive instead of reactive. What do we need to do to get us to where we want to go? So that's the strategic priorities and the action items, building out that work plan. And then how are we doing on our plan? Creating a system of meeting cadence and accountability so we can actually say, here's our plan, here's what we actually did, and look at it as a cycle instead of a one-time activity. So what we do, we provide flat rate strategic planning support. We do the meeting preparation, the survey, the pre-work. We facilitate the session, whether it's a 1 or 2 or 3 day session. We create documentation in Word and PowerPoint to bridge that communication gap like we talked about earlier. We provide coaching calls to support the rollout because obviously the plan itself is not good enough. So if you as a leader are creating the strategic plan, always think about what's next and how are you going to support your people and really put a system in there. And then implementation support and cascading planning meetings is taking that vision from the high level and then dropping it down to the different departments so that everybody has clarity in their plan. The other thing I didn't talk about here is when we talk about cascading is each department or each function could have their own strategic plan that aligns with the organizational plan. So everybody has their own version of success that is connected to them. If I work at a 2,000 person organization and there's the board strategic plan, I want to know how that affects my customer service department. Well, if I create my own vision that aligns to that, then everybody's moving in the same direction and it's clearly articulated. So in summary, number 1, create one clear vision of success. Especially if you're the senior leadership team, if success was a place, how would you know if you got there? Be really clear on what success looks like and use that as your focal point for alignment. Some people have said like a true north or X whatever. It's just as long as you have a clear vision of success, then everybody can rally around. You're either moving closer to it or further away. Number 2, engage stakeholders in the process. You got to make sure that people are with you. One of the things I really like is you got to attract before you pull. It's like the claw game. You can't win that prize if you actually don't have a hold of the prize. So you really want people to be bought into the process, to see themselves in that future. And to do that, you really need to make sure that you understand who your people are, what their interest and motivation is, and make sure that you're going with them throughout the process. One thing we didn't talk about too much is the communicate top down, bottom up. And that really means making sure that the vision makes its way its way to the frontline employee, as well as you hearing the feedback from people on the front line as to if your strategy is executable. You know, I've heard a lot of stories of people like forgetting information or not being aware of the information that came from the front lines, because by the time it gets to you as a CEO or as a senior leader, it's often too late, or it's become a really big problem. So you want to build a system internally, and not just a one-time thing, but so that you can get the communication top down as well as bottom up. And finally, I want you to think of strategy. I want you to think of strategy development, and I want you to think about alignment as an ongoing, recurring process to reach your vision, not just one meeting. So you need to build the meeting cadence, you need to build the communication plan, you need to build the accountability so that you are going to continually stay on your plan. You know, depending on what time you're watching this in the year, if you build your plan now, in 8 months from now, and you just review it for the first time, you're not going to hit your goals. Okay, so before you even do your planning meeting, make sure that you have systems in place to track your progress and track how you're doing so that you stay accountable to it, so it doesn't show up in, let's say, October, and you're like, oh yeah, that plan, now we have everything to do, we should probably get on that. You're not going to win. Now, here's the opportunity of alignment. If I had to convince you further to get your team aligned, you'll get more progress on your plan. You'll have more work satisfaction because it'll be the feeling of progress because everybody's working towards the same goal. You'll have less resistance. You know, those people who don't want to do anything. If you get them bought into the process and you get them aligned, they're not going to have that resistance anymore, which means they can actually spend that energy towards doing their job. Less frustration. You know, when you have people on your team that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, well, often those people have no idea what they're supposed to be doing because nobody told them. They don't know why they're doing it. Or worse, they're avoiding doing the wrong thing because they don't want to get in trouble. And if you have people avoiding doing the wrong thing, it means that you've got some serious structural problems as a manager. And it happens all the time. And when people leave because of frustration, or where you've seen that there's about 30% of the workforce is engaged in their work, 60 to 70% are actively disengaged because they don't know how to win. They don't know what success looks like. So you got to create that for them. Better use of time, money, and energy. Well, you know, that sort of goes obviously, but instead of, you know, blasting all of your resources across a lot of different areas, you're focused on one key objective, you're moving it forward, and you're getting focused like a laser, and you're just going to have more success. And the last one is better decision making. You know, if you're making decisions as a CEO or as a leader, and you're just doing it without input from other people, you're missing a huge piece of the picture because you only have your perspective. The reason you have a leadership team is so you can get all of their different perspectives to make the better decision. But the other thing is, let's say you have HR. HR only sees HR problems. Marketing only sees marketing problems. But when you put them in a room to talk about the strategy, they finally get a chance to see the other perspectives. And they say, we're actually dealing with the same stuff. Like, we're on the same team. We're not against each other. And so it'll help make better organizational decisions. It'll help your prioritization. It'll help your strategic plan. And you're going to look better. Like, you're going to look better as a manager and leader. And I didn't put it in here, but when you get alignment, when you have a clear structure for your strategic plan, it helps you be a leader instead of a manager. You don't have to be putting fires out. You can stay at the highest level where you provide the most value to the organization instead of just staying busy. And you'll actually accomplish your strategic plan. And that's what it's all about. You have this plan you want to accomplish. You have these big dreams. Well, you're not going to get there without alignment. But if you put alignment in place and you create a system and structure to make it happen, you will accomplish your strategic plan successfully. Okay, so next steps for you. So I told you you have an opportunity to register in our course. And I'm going to give you that opportunity now. So if you want to have a course, a process on how to lead your strategic planning session, we unpack each of those modules to lead you through the process and guide you through how to create a strategic plan. We give you content and workbooks so that you can document everything, and we'll guide you through our process to create an aligned strategic plan. So what you need to do, go to SMEstrategy.net/course. You can enroll for $297, that's USD, watch the content, download the workbooks, and then get your team aligned and move forward. If you watch today's webinar and you buy the course, I will offer a complimentary consulting call, and it's not a consulting call to tell you what to do. It's really, I assume you're going to look at the content, and I really want you to be successful in your plan. The reason why we put the course out is because we know we can't help everyone everywhere, but we want to. Okay, so if you buy the course, say I watched your webinar, you said you'd chat with me, I will definitely have a call with you, or somebody on my team will have a call with you so that you can be successful on your plan, so that your team can enjoy their lives and their work, and that you can make a big difference in the community that you operate in. And if you have a mission, like a purpose of your organization, it'll help you accomplish that so you can have impact in the world. So get the course, smestrategy.net/course. Hours of content. I think we got 7 or 8 hours on there. If you watch, the first 4, you'll be way ahead of the game. And then you can share that with your team as well. Or you can contact us for a personalized consultation. If you'd like us to work with your team, facilitate your meetings, support you with your execution process, we do, like I said, engagements about 2 days, and some people hire us for the year to coach their teams, to support their strategy execution, whatever you need. So smestrategy.net/course. Enroll in the course or contact us. Now, I want to talk about, in closing here, again, the why behind this is that if you're a leader with no followers, what does that make you? You're just going for a walk. And so I know there's a lot of people there who are creating strategic plans with no buy-in, with no alignment, with no clarity, and you're just a leader. You're just a guy going for a walk or a gal going for a walk. So I really invite you to be the kind of leader, create the kind of strategic plan, create the kind of vision that people want to buy into, that want to follow, and actually know yourself as the kind of person who is a leader of people, who accomplishes big things. And the way to do that is to actually have a structured process to make it happen, and we can help you with that. So as we finish up here, I want to put out the Q&A there, and I'm just going to put a poll up quick. So there's a poll up there. I'd love to know what your biggest challenge with strategy development execution is right now. But really, in closing here, I want to answer your questions. I want to know what's important to you. Where are you wanting support? What are you wanting support with to help get alignment or drive your strategy forward? How can we help you? So there's a Q&A, there's a chat box there. Happy to answer any questions there, but how can we help you get aligned? And then if you have any additional questions, you can get our resources at smestrategy.net. You can email us at info@smestrategy.net, or you can call our toll-free number 1-855-895-5446, and we'll talk about your strategic plan. But thank you for attending the webinar today. I'm going to stick on for about 15 minutes or so to answer some questions. So please answer or ask your questions in the chat box. And then this presentation is recorded. It will be sent to you in 24 hours from the completion. And I'll also send you, if you were on the webinar, a copy of our strategic planning template as an extra bonus to thank you for joining, because it'll make a difference for your people. So what is the most, somebody asked, what is the most effective way to build buy-in from an executive leadership team level? And I would say the first step there is have the conversation. What you want is not necessarily what somebody else wants. And so if you begin the conversation with them and say, I want this, you want this. I want pizza, you want pasta. Well, maybe there's a restaurant that serves pizza and pasta. And it's so simple. Often I find leadership teams and individual leaders and human beings get so stuck in being right. I need to be right. It needs to be my way. It has to be a win-lose scenario versus a win-win scenario. And as a facilitator, my job as a facilitator is just to go into different organizations to help people talk better. And I basically repeat what people say so that people can hear it. But I often see that most people get so hung up on them being right that they can't hear that the other person is agreeing with them. I'm going to say that again. You are probably too focused on being right that you can't hear the other person agreeing with you because they're saying it differently. So if you can shut up for a second and really hear what the other person is saying, you're going to find that you guys are really saying the same thing and that you're more aligned than you actually knew in the first place. And that's one of the reasons we do the survey, is because when we do the survey and we ask those questions, people get to see how much they are aligned before the session. And all you read is the words. You don't read that that person didn't deliver that deliverable 2 weeks ago, or that person didn't invite you to the company Christmas party, or, you know, you don't hear any of that stuff. You just read the words for what they are. And then you really find that people are more aligned than you thought. And then you can focus on the areas where you're not aligned. Okay. How long in advance of the planning session do you need to start with the surveying and building of alignment? We book strategy sessions out 6 to 8 weeks in advance. We find that for a survey to be done well, it takes a minimum of 3 weeks, basically 2 weeks to administer the survey, 1 week for people to read the answers. You know, you want to give people time, you don't want to rush them, but I've seen it done in like 10 days, as long as you can get it organized. The interesting thing about planning your strategy session, so the biggest roadblock to actually getting this happen is planning the date. If you want to do a strategy session, just plan the date. And once you plan the date, people will be like, oh, we have this meeting. People will be looking forward to the meeting to accomplish that. And when you have that, people will already be thinking about, we having this meeting to talk about the future, to get alignment, to get clarity, to move that forward. Perfect. I'm just reading that. How do you handle strategic priorities when the leaders have conflicting views? Great question, Patrice. So because of our process, we look at where we are, what's working, what's not working, and the opportunities. And we have more opportunities than we have time, money, and energy to focus on. When we have the vision, it's where we want to get to. The mission is how we're going to make it happen, and the values are, you know, how we have to act in order to make that happen. When we identify the risks, we measure the risks and we actually rank them, because not all risks are created equal. You know, some things like, you know, 45% of your staff quitting is not going to be the same thing as it might rain tomorrow or might snow tomorrow and delay your team. And when we rank and prioritize the risks, they come into themes after. And then when we move into the strategic priorities, we say, okay, as an organization, where do we need to focus our strategic priorities? If we only did a couple things over the next 12 months, what would they be? And often, because you've gone through that process, that people actually see, it's like it smacks them in the face of what needs to be done. And in terms of the individual versus the group, the analogy I use is a sports analogy. The name on the front of the jersey is more important than the name on the back of the jersey. Okay, so people really you need to approach that strategy session from the level of group, not from the level of individual. And if you approach it from the level of individual, it's totally fine. You just need to transform the culture from the organization perspective to make sure that everybody is at the level of group. We also have ground rules on ahead of strategy sessions to share, you know, what we expect of you in the session. How do you work on complacency in strategy execution? So I'm going to look at that in two parts. One is, if you're having trouble with strategy execution, it could be by design of the goals. The goals could be fundamentally flawed in their design, which means that they're unaccomplishable. If they're not SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, if they don't have like a set beginning, set end, set clear deliverable, you're going to fail. That's one. Another, actually, I'll do it in 3 parts. Another is, if you've delegated and told somebody to do something, they're less likely to buy into it. They're less likely to be aligned because it feels like it was pushed on them, versus them saying, here's what I see to be able to accomplish this, this, and this. And I'm going to accomplish it by this date, by that day, by that date. So it's really about the pulling them into the plan versus pushing them on there. The other thing about strategy execution is, you know, do you have specific measurable goals? Can you actually track the progress? And do you have enough action in terms of quality and quantity to make that successful? And if you don't, that's going to be a big impediment. We recommend Cascade Strategy as a dashboard to track strategic planning execution. Because then everybody gets to see the scorecard and everybody gets to see, oh, this is a yellow. You know, we're not doing red. This is red. We're way behind. This is green. We're doing great. So it shows it right there. And then you measure the performance in the world of performance, not in the world of feelings. I feel like I'm doing a good job versus, oh, I said I was going to do 100 of these and I've done 40 and I should be done next week. So I'm behind, or that's good and I'm ahead. So that's how you can support the strategy execution there. Is there value in having a strategic planning session for your department if the organization hasn't had one? I believe yes. Now, here's why. I've had some organizations that don't have a corporate vision. They haven't done it. They haven't gone through the process. That's fine, because your team is still doing the work. And I invite you to have the strategy session as your department, so your department can get aligned, because your department still has stuff to do. You might not be able to overcome the fact that the company or organization doesn't have a vision or a strategic plan, but you can be the example. And when you start crushing targets, when you start making progress, when people start seeing that the culture in your team is transforming, people are happy, people are more engaged, and you can like feel the progress, like you can actually, it's palpable, then people will say, well, what the hell did you guys do? And you say, well, we had a strategy session. Well, we should probably do that as a company. And we've seen that as well. The other thing is, if you have a senior leader who doesn't have a strategic plan, send them this webinar, and they will be able to get engaged with what you're doing, and then we can help them with that. Fantastic. Okay, we spend a lot of times in lengthy meetings that are like a broken record. How do we get out of that cycle that doesn't work? Have your vision and strategic priorities at the top of your meeting agenda so it stays focused. Have a meeting agenda on paper so it stays focused. Institute a rule that if it takes 2 minutes or longer to talk about, you set a different meeting. Make sure that everybody brings their updates to the meeting, and make sure that your priorities are straight. If there's other problems, like you guys talk over each other, or you don't communicate, or you don't listen, that's another story. But I think it's about the rigor of communication as an organization and putting some structure in place to move that forward. Okay. Do you see some staff threatened by change coming out of a strategic planning session, and how do you diffuse that? Okay. The strategic planning session should be the best thing for the business or the best thing for the organization. And like I said earlier, some people might not be wanting to get on that bus, and it does mean change, or it could mean change. What I tell people is the benefit of the future needs to be greater than the pain of change. You know, if you went to the doctor and the doctor says, you have to stop drinking, you're going to die, or you have to stop smoking or you're going to die, you have a choice. You can stop smoking or you're going to die. And then at that point, it's up to you to choose. Is the benefit of the future greater than changing? And if it's not, then you're going to keep having that same thing. When we look at creating plans, we say, hey, if this is where we are, this is our trajectory. You know, do we want to continue on this trajectory, or do we want to create a new path? If we are okay with staying on our trajectory, then nothing is going to motivate you enough to change. You actually have to create the urgency of change. Why change? Why change now? You know, an example that is going to be referenced in business books is Blockbuster. You know, Blockbuster minimized the impact of digital video. Or they said, you know, it's not going to happen. We don't think about it. Well, they didn't change. And now they're out of business. And there's countless examples of organizations not pivoting, not dealing with problem staff, not dealing with things at the core because they were tough conversations. But if you don't have the fortitude to deal with the tough conversations, then you're going to have to deal with the impact of not having that conversation. On that note, you know, some people have asked about culture. If you have somebody on your team that's not on board with your culture, your vision, or what's happening in the future, they're going to pull it back. It's not like they're going to be neutral. No one's ever neutral. They're actually going to pull it back, and it's going to slow you down. And it's come up a lot of times where staff who have been there a really long time, and if they're not on board with where the organization is headed, I'll say the group is headed, then they're not going where the company's headed. And you sort of need to get them off the bus or move them to a different seat on the bus, as is said. So they're tough conversations to have. Using a facilitator can sort of take the charge out of it, because as a facilitator, like they don't know us and we don't know them. And so we get to focus on the process, not the person. And that's my advice for anybody. Focus on the process, not the person. And if you focus on the process, then you can actually address what's going on without dealing the emotional piece. So that's that. Must we do the action plan creation as a continuous part of the strategic planning retreat, or can we reconvene in a few days a week to complete the action plans? I highly recommend that you do at least some action planning at the end of the strategy session, you know, up to, but not limited to, how you're going to communicate the plan and how you're going to roll it out, you know, some high level next steps in each of the priority areas. Because if you finish the strategy session, everybody's going to be like, yeah, that was awesome, great. Now what? So you got to have a couple next steps, what we will say, okay, here's what we can do. At very least, we're going to meet in 3 days to talk about the action plan. At least the loop is closed. So really need to make sure that you have next steps somehow. Next steps from a strategic planning priority or strategic planning perspective, or next steps from a communication plan. How are you going to roll this out? How do you deal with an underperforming person in the senior management team or in the process? Again, process and not people. I've heard the term performance managed out. So sometimes if someone's being confrontational, dysfunctional, I invite you to be curious as to why. Like, don't jump to the conclusion, but be really curious. Why are they not doing it? Do they not know why they're doing this? Are they seeing a problem in doing this? Do they not know how they're successful? Are they being told to act a certain way, but they're being rewarded a different way? So there could be a lot of internal conflict dealing with that person. If they're not moving towards where the organization is going and being confrontational, then you basically need to get them out of there. And that's like a really blunt way of saying it. But let's say you have an organization with 300 people and one person at the top is stopping the progress, then it's no longer about you and it's no longer about the leadership team. That person is harming 300 people. That person is acting out of line with what the purpose of the business is. And it's actually your fiduciary duty as a director to rectify that. Okay. And obviously, like, that is not legal advice. That is not HR advice, but talk to your people, but really like think about it from that perspective, is that you're not just harming yourself by not making that decision. You're harming the hundreds of people that you serve and the thousands of people that are your customers or what have you. Okay. More and more people nowadays want to be involved in the decision-making process, i.e. millennials, which I know you, Steve, so I'm not going to take that personally. How do we keep them involved in building the vision and or strategy while not inviting everyone to the planning session? Surveys, communication. After the session, I recommend, let's say you have your vision, you roll it out with a team, then you meet with departments and meet with individuals. So cascade that communication, ask them what's important, and ask them how they want to participate. You know, there are people who really want to win and really want to be given the opportunities to be successful. And when you as a leader provide that vision and provide the framework, you say, hey, great, how do you see you can be successful in that? I did this with a software company, and they had 20 staff. And we said, here's our top 3 strategic priority areas. You know, how can we move this forward? We had 150 ideas saying we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and just a giant list. And it just showed how aligned and engaged people were, because when they saw the future and they saw the scoreboard, like, this is how I move the scoreboard forward, they were bought into moving it forward. Your people just want to win. And by creating an aligned strategic plan, they can be engaged and they can win. Okay. I think that's everything today. I've got a couple beads of sweat going on, so you know I'm very passionate about today. I want to thank you all for attending the webinar today. If you enjoyed it, please just send me a note. I would love your feedback. Love anything that you can share. Tell your friends. You'll get the webinar in 24 hours. And then if you have any questions, be sure to contact us, smestrategy.net, info@SME-strategy. And then, again, make sure you enroll in the course if you're looking for some guidance. Talk to us. You know, we'll be happy to recommend anything. If we're not a good fit, we'll recommend somebody else. The biggest thing for us is that you get the support you need. You have a framework. You have a process that you can use to get your team engaged, to get your team aligned, and like have that common language, have that common process, have that common framework that everybody knows. Here's the boundary conditions. This is what we need to win. This course will give you all of the ingredients that you need. We made it so that we could help as many people as possible, even if we can't fly everywhere. So I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. I hope it was valuable. Please ask any questions, help as much as possible. But once again, Anthony Taylor from SME Strategy, thank you for participating today, and we will see you next time. All right, take care, everybody.